Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Today, we are looking at a company that's, well, frankly, a bit of a puzzle. ORIS, Oriental Rise Holdings. It seems like the ultimate high-risk, high-reward play.
It really does. You've got these incredibly low valuation numbers sitting right next to some pretty significant regulatory risks. The core question we're trying to answer today, based on the material we've reviewed, is ORIS Oriental Rise Holdings actually a buy right now?
Exactly. We need to figure out why a profitable, debt-free company is trading like it's about to vanish. We'll dig into the huge swings in its stock price, that really odd balance sheet, and a very important Nasdaq deadline that's fast approaching. Before we jump in, just a quick reminder, please hit subscribe, like the show, and drop us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And hey, if there's another company you want us to analyze, just let us know its name in the comments below. Okay, let's try and make sense of this contradiction. So ORIS Oriental Rise Holdings got some attention recently with a big price jump. What was behind that 51% surge in September, especially after the stock had been hammered for so long?
Yeah, that surge was mostly seen as a technical bounce, clawing back some of those heavy losses. But it wasn't just random market noise. It did follow a couple of concrete actions by the company.
Okay.
First, back in July 2025, they announced a public offering, raised about $6.9 million. That involved selling 14.8 million units, and importantly, these included warrants. The stated goal was funding production expansion for their tea business and, well, general corporate purposes.
Okay, raising capital makes sense if they need cash, but warrants, doesn't that add potential dilution for shareholders, especially when the share price is already dangerously low?
That's the rub, isn't it? It absolutely introduces that risk. You get the cash infusion now, which they obviously felt they needed, but it hangs over the existing shareholders. It suggests maybe immediate cash was the absolute priority.
What was the second action?
The second move was more strategic. In August, they started due diligence to acquire two other companies, Fujin Daohe and Ningde Minji. The idea seems to be vertical integration within the Chinese tea market. They're talking about synergies in R&D, branding, trying to push into higher margin products, sort of an attempt to combat that revenue decline they've seen.
So operationally, they're trying to strengthen the core business. Makes sense. But the market reaction, or lack thereof long-term, is stark. And this is where it gets really strange, those financial numbers. They look almost too good to be true on paper.
Right. If you only looked at the valuation metrics, you'd think it was the bargain of the century.
So lay them out for us. Just how cheap are we talking?
We're talking absurdly cheap. The trailing PE ratio, depending on the exact calculation date and the source, it's somewhere between 0.94 and 0.65.
Whoa, wait. Under 1? A PE under 1?
Yeah, less than 1.
That basically means the market values the entire company at less than a single year of its past profits. That implies zero faith in future earnings, right? Or that the profits aren't real somehow.
Precisely. It screams skepticism. And it's not just the PE. The price-to-sales ratio is tiny, just 0.09. Price-to-book is 0.03. And this is with a reported net profit margin of around 13.9%. They made $2.09 million net income on about $15 million in revenue, but the market just doesn't buy it or expects it to evaporate.
Okay, so profitable, incredibly cheap valuation. But the balance sheet adds another layer of weirdness. It looks incredibly strong, almost fortress-like, which just doesn't fit the stock price.
It's completely counterintuitive. The financial health indicators, very strong liquidity, practically zero leverage. Their debt-to-equity ratio is 0.00. No long-term debt, none.
Zero debt. So they're funding everything, including those potential acquisitions, with cash and equity.
Seems so. And the number that really jumps out is the current ratio. It's reported at 24.8.
24.8, so nearly $25 in current assets for every dollar of current liabilities. That's not just conservative. That's hoarding cash.
It is. It suggests, well, a couple things. One, management is terrified of debt. Two, and maybe more critically for investors, it signals pretty extreme capital inefficiency. All that cash isn't really being put to work aggressively for growth. And you see that reflected in the relatively low return on equity and return on assets, just 3.14% and 1.86% respectively.
So they have the financial firepower, but they're not using it effectively. That could definitely feed into the market's doubt about their growth story.
Exactly. The balance sheet looks safe, but maybe too safe, indicating a lack of dynamism or perhaps underlying problems we can't see.
Which brings us neatly to the risks. All that value is completely overshadowed. What are the major red flags that explain why this thing trades like it's on life support?
Okay. Flag number one is simply its size or lack thereof. This is a microcap stock. Market cap bouncing between roughly $2.4 million and $3.5 million. That tiny size makes it incredibly vulnerable to manipulation, and it means any corporate action, like that offering we mentioned, has a huge potential impact, especially dilution.
Okay, so it's tiny and fragile. What's next?
Risk number 2, liquidity and volatility, driven by who owns the stock. Daily price swings can be huge, like 33% or more sometimes. And here's the key. Insider ownership is massive, reported at 73.82%. Meanwhile, institutional ownership is almost non-existent, just 0.20%.
74% held by insiders. Wow, so the actual amount of stock available for the public to trade, the float, must be minuscule.
Extremely small,
Mm-hmm.
which explains the wild volatility. Any significant buy or sell order can move the price dramatically. It's just not a stock most people can trade easily or safely.
Okay, so low liquidity, high volatility. What's the third big risk? You mentioned a deadline earlier.
Yes, risk number 3, the regulatory countdown. This is probably the most immediate threat. Can they even stay listed on the Nasdaq?
Right, the Nasdaq compliance issue. Tell us about that.
They have until December 29, 2025 to meet the minimum bid price requirement. That means the stock needs to trade at $1 or higher for 10 consecutive business days. If they can't manage that, they face delisting. And the market chatter, according to the sources, is already anticipating a reverse stock split if they're nearing that deadline without compliance.
A reverse split. Yeah, that's often seen as a last resort. It artificially boosts the share price, but rarely solves the underlying problems and often just precedes more selling.
Right.
The ultimate sign of distress.
It often is, yeah. It's a red flag for many investors. And finally, the fourth major risk, which kind of ties everything together, disclosure, or the lack thereof. As of when our source material was compiled, the latest 10K annual report apparently wasn't available on the SEC Edgar database.
No recent 10K, that's worrying. How can investors trust any of these numbers, the profits, the balance sheet, without the latest audited financials?
They can't. Really, it creates a huge information gap. This lack of recent verifiable data is a critical problem. It undermines the entire deep value argument. If you can't trust the inputs, the output is meaningless.
That lack of transparency, combined with the super high insider ownership, it doesn't paint a great picture of communication with public shareholders.
Okay, so for anyone brave enough to even watch this stock, what are the key dates to monitor in the short term, say the next 3 months, besides that big December deadline?
Well, operationally, the big one is the Q3 earnings release. Probably lands around October 30th. That needs to show some sign of turning the revenue decline around to give any credibility to the recent stock bounce or their strategy. And then, of course, December 29th, the Nasdaq deadline, is the elephant in the room.
Any other dates?
For traders watching momentum, keep an eye on November 15th. Potential ETF rebalancing could cause flows. And maybe November 25th, which might capture some holiday sales data, especially Singles' Day results, given they're a Chinese consumer company. That could cause a short-term blip up or down. Okay, so wrapping this all up, for the listener asking the core question, is now a good time to buy ORIS Oriental Rise holdings? What's the verdict from our analysis?
Look, putting it all together, the overall picture gives this a very low rating, something like a 2 out of 10 on a risk-adjusted basis. Yes, those value metrics are mathematically there on paper, the low PE, the strong balance sheet, they're real in the data we have. But they are completely, utterly swamped by the risks.
So the volatility, the terrible liquidity, the massive delisting threat from Nasdaq, and now this lack of recent filings, it just erases the appeal of the cheapness.
Pretty much entirely. This is absolutely not something we could recommend for any kind of long-term investment portfolio. It's just too dangerous. The only people who might even consider this are highly speculative, risk-loving, short-term traders who are essentially betting on technical chart patterns or maybe a brief pre-deadline rally. And they have to understand the risk of losing everything potentially very quickly is unusually high.
You're essentially betting against the clock and against overwhelming market sentiment, not investing.
Correct. It's a gamble on survival, not fundamentals.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. You have insiders controlling almost 3/4 of the stock, a company hoarding cash while pursuing acquisitions, and reportedly missing SEC filings. What does that combination tell you about management's priorities? Are they focused on building long-term value for all shareholders, or perhaps something else? That's something to chew on. We hope this look into ORIS Oriental Rise Holdings helps you understand the complexities and dangers of the microcap world. Thanks for tuning in to Investing Talk podcast. Remember to leave us your comments and let us know what company you'd like us to tackle next time.